The atmosphere surrounding the Royal Lodge has shifted from one of beleaguered defiance to something far more brittle and desperate, signaling a seismic fracture within a family unit that once prided itself on being an impenetrable fortress against the world. Tonight, the House of York stands on a precipice, staring down into a chasm of isolation that few could have predicted even a year ago. Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, a woman who has weathered scandals, financial ruin, and the relentless glare of the tabloid press with a trademark resilience, is reportedly facing a personal collapse unlike any she has endured before. The narrative of the Three Musketeers, Sarah and her daughters against the world, has disintegrated. We are witnessing the dismantling of a decades-long dynamic, a painful unraveling of loyalty and obligation that leaves the Duchess standing alone in the ruins of her family's reputation. This is not merely a domestic dispute. It is a fundamental restructuring of the royal hierarchy, played out in the shadow of an ancient institution struggling to modernize, where the collateral damage is measured in broken relationships and silence. At the heart of this crumbling edifice is the heartbreaking estrangement between Sarah and her two daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. For years, these young women served as the emotional ballast for their parents, the dignified counterweight to the chaos that seemed to perpetually swirl around Prince Andrew and Sarah.
Him and Sarah Ferguson to leave the Royal Lodge. As sources told People magazine that the pair have been told to move out by January 31. Prince Andrew, we now call him Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He's officially been stripped of 2 more titles by his older brother, King Charles.
They were the steadfast defenders, the loyal foot soldiers who stood by their mother through public blunders and their father through legal and moral firestorms. However, sources deep within the royal circle suggest that this fragile alliance has finally shattered under the weight of untenable pressure. The decision by Beatrice and Eugenie to effectively cut ties and distance themselves from the toxic orbit of the Royal Lodge is being described not as an act of malice, but as a desperate maneuver of self-preservation. It is a strategic retreat, born of the realization that they can no longer mortgage their own futures and the reputations of their own young families to pay for the sins and stubbornness of the past generation.
In the meantime, we know that Andrew and Fergie are still in the house, and some of the details, it's a little bit Greek tragedy. It's almost a little bit like a Tennessee Williams character, especially when it comes to Fergie. We're hearing reports that she's taking it hard. I think that her identity was tied up in being Duchess of York. She had that title since her wedding day, and the loss of it allegedly was just devastated her. She supposedly has been relying heavily on the staff at Royal Lodge.
The catalysts for this separation are multifaceted, but they are rooted in the terrifying reality of a slimmed-down monarchy where there is no safety net for those who court controversy.
Well, the whole thing about Dutch and I is that we met when I was 16, she was 14. So we've known each other a very long time, and she had the quickest wit. That's what the thing. Anyway, I think you're referring to our hen night, are you? But
yeah. Beatrice and Eugenie are navigating a treacherous path. They are cousins to the future king, yet they occupy a precarious hinterland between private citizens and royal figures. They are acutely aware that their uncle, King Charles III, and their cousin, the Prince of Wales, are ruthlessly focused on the survival of the crown. In this new era, association with the chaotic melodrama of the York parents is a liability that can no longer be afforded.
Revealed that Prince Andrew hosted the late ex-offender Jeffrey Epstein as well as Ghislaine Maxwell and Harvey Weinstein at the Royal Lodge, the publicly owned home where he effectively lives rent-free after he paid for its renovation.
The princesses are mothers now, to August and Sienna, and the protective instinct has shifted. Where once they protected their parents, they must now protect their children from the stain of inherited scandal. The frustration is reportedly palpable, particularly with Eugenie, who views her mother's continued erratic public pronouncements and refusal to quietly recede into the background as a direct threat to the stability.
There are reports around how Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, of course formerly known as Prince Andrew, is spending his final days at Royal Lodge, and he's said to be ranting to himself.
She is trying to build. Sarah's inability to read the room, to understand that the time for public rehabilitation has passed, has seemingly forced her daughters to make the most painful choice of their lives, to walk away. This emotional isolation is compounding a devastating reality for Sarah Ferguson, who has long derived her sense of self-worth and identity from her role as a mother and the glue holding the York unit together. Without the validation and support of Beatrice and Eugenie, Sarah is reportedly unmoored, left to navigate the wreckage of her life with her former husband, a man whose own predicament is the anchor dragging them both into the depths. The psychological toll is immense. Reports of Sarah's vulnerability, her tearful outbursts, and her increasingly frantic attempts to maintain relevance are not merely gossip.
Front page of the Sun newspaper, royal exclusive, Fergie time. Sarah Ferguson, formerly the Duchess of York, of course, is considering offers for a tell-all TV interview in the wake of her public downfall over links to sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. US channels.
They are the symptoms of a woman realizing that her support system has evaporated. She is facing the terrifying prospect of total irrelevance, trapped in a gilded cage with a man who is himself a pariah. The isolation is profound, a stark contrast to the noisy, chaotic camaraderie that once defined their family life. However, this interpersonal tragedy is inextricably linked to a physical battleground, the bitter, entrenched siege of Royal Lodge. The sprawling, Grade 2 listed property in Windsor Great Park has become the symbol of Prince Andrew's delusion and the focal point of the king's frustration. This is not simply a dispute about bricks and mortar. It is a proxy war for the soul and standards of the modern monarchy. Andrew's desperate, white-knuckled grip on the lease, which runs until 2078, is the physical manifestation.
Are said to be willing to pay six-figure sums to secure the chat with the former Duchess of York. It would evoke memories of her ex-husband, Andrew Mountbatten's Windsor car crash Newsnight interview. A source told The Sun, Andrew's had his chance to tell his story. Now it's Fergie's time. This could be a major headache for the king.
Of his refusal to accept his diminished status. He believes, with an almost tragic arrogance, that he is still a prince of consequence, entitled to the trappings of power despite having been stripped of the duties. For Sarah, living in the shadow of this delusion, the house is both a sanctuary and a prison. Her continued residence there, ostensibly as a guest, but in reality as a co-conspirator in Andrew's stubbornness, implicates her in his defiance of the king. King Charles III's patience has reportedly evaporated. The monarch sees the continued occupation of Royal Lodge by his disgraced brother as a festering wound on the reputation of the crown. It is a constant reminder of the bad old days of royal excess and lack of accountability. The king's desire to remove Andrew is twofold. Practically, the estate is an expensive asset that could be better utilized, perhaps for Queen Camilla or the Prince and Princess of Wales. Reputationally, removing Andrew is an act of hygiene, a physical excision of a source of constant embarrassment. But Andrew is not going quietly. He is fighting a rearguard action, weaponizing his lease and seemingly daring his brother to physically evict him. This intransigence places Sarah in the crossfire. By staying, she aligns herself with the rebel. By leaving, she admits defeat and loses the last vestige of her royal lifestyle. The secrecy surrounding the financing of their lifestyle at the lodge, the security, the maintenance, the sheer cost of heating such a pile, fuels public suspicion. Who is paying? And why should the public tolerate this display of entitlement when the king has called for austerity? The political machinations behind the scenes are brutal. The palace is employing a classic carrot-and-stick strategy to dislodge the duke. The carrot is the suggestion of a financial settlement, a golden handshake to buy his silence and his departure, moving him perhaps to a smaller, more manageable property, or even encouraging a move abroad. The stick is far more personal and damaging, the freezing out of the entire York branch from the inner sanctum of royal life. This is where Prince William's influence is most keenly felt. The Prince of Wales is reportedly furious at the reputational damage his uncle and aunt continue to inflict on the institution he will one day head. Unlike his grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, who harbored a soft spot for Andrew, William has no such sentimental attachment. He views the Yorks as a toxic distraction. His relentless push for a clean monarchy means there is no room for the murky financial arrangements and social indiscretions that characterize the York brand. William's stance has reportedly terrified Beatrice and Eugenie, further accelerating their decision to distance themselves from their parents to salvage their own standing with the future king. For Sarah Ferguson, the landscape is bleak. The devastating internal storm sweeping through the Windsor estate has left her exposed. The mood within the palace has shifted from one of exasperated tolerance to active hostility. Where once there was a tacit agreement to ignore the eccentricities of the Duchess, there is now a determination to sever the link entirely. The internal momentum driven by Charles and William has placed Sarah squarely in the spotlight of scrutiny. Her financial precarity is a major concern. Without the protective umbrella of the Royal Lodge and Andrew's allowance, her independent earning power is questionable, and her history of financial mismanagement looms large. The fear is that a desperate Sarah is a dangerous Sarah, prone to selling stories, making ill-advised media appearances, or trading on her title in ways that further embarrass the crown. This is why the isolation from her daughters is so critical. They were the restraint, the voices of reason. Without them, she is unanchored. The public, too, has lost patience. The era of deference is over.